Trump halts his Cadillac one motorcade for a homeless old woman, and what he does next will inspire millions that afternoon. The city was drenched in the hot summer sun. The unceasing honkin' of cars and the population moving along the pavements painted the customary colorful picture of a modern metropolis in this hectic atmosphere. Donald Trump's Cadillac One motorcade cruised past exuding authority. The lead cars parkled beneath the blazing sunlight, drawing every eye toward its commanding presence. Inside the car, Trump was focused on a report being presented by one of his advisors. The assistant's steady voice filled the cabin, but Trump's attention was instantly pulled outside the glass. What he saw made him pause. Amid the busy walkway stood a weak elderly woman. She was so small that she seemed to be swallowed by the hurrying mob. Her hair was stark white, her face deeply etched with creases from time, and tiredness in her shaky hands. She held a dusty piece of cardboard with faded yet obvious words. "Please help me. My granddaughter needs a miracle." Her eyes had a subtle yearning as though waiting for someone to notice yet. Every passing by simply walked on. Some glanced her way briefly. Others turned their cheeks. But no one stopped. Trump fell silent, his gaze fixated on the scene. He felt an odd pull, as like he couldn't just observe and move on. "Stop the automobile." He shouted, his voice calm but forceful. The motorcade shrieked to a halt in the middle of the busy street. Brakes screeched, and automobiles behind them came to an abrupt stop, producing a ripple of astonishment inside the vehicle. His advisors, the security team, exchanged perplexed stares. "Sir, this place isn't safe. We need stay moving," one of the security personnel rapidly cautioned, his tone cautious. Trump shook his head, his gaze never leaving the elderly woman on the sidewalk. "No, I want to know her story." No one dared to challenge you in the heavy stillness. Trump unlocked the car door and stepped out the minute his polished shoes hit the concrete. The atmosphere seemed to shift. The normal city noise softened, and every eye went toward him. Some knew him immediately, and hurriedly grabbed out their phones to film the moment he walked toward the woman with calm, methodical steps. When he neared her, he bent slowly, his stare meeting hers, not as a dominant leader, but as a man filled with compassion. "What's your name?" Trump asked, his voice lower than normal, but yet conveying the seriousness of his size. The old woman looked up, her clouded eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hope. After a minute she answered, her voice quivering. "My name is Martha. Why are you here?" he asked gently, his tone calm and encouraging. Martha took a big breath, gripping the cardboard sign tightly, as if letting go would mean losing her last glimmer of hope. "My grandchild. She needs assistance. Her parents died in the flood recently. It's just me now. But I don't know what to do. We've lost our home. We've lost everything. I just want to save her." Her words rang in the Trump's mind like a bell. He didn't only hear her anguish, he felt the despair and determination laced into her fragile voice. He sighed deeply, straightening up, and looked back at his motorcade. "Get the car ready. I want to go where she's staying." "Sir, this region is risky. We shouldn't linger here." A security officer set out, his voice tinged with anxiety. Trump turned to him, his stare immovable and resolute. "If she can live there, I can visit. If you're worried, feel free to remain behind." No one dared to protest in the stillness that followed. Trump placed a soothing hand on Martha's shoulder, his eyes brimming with purpose. "Lead the way. I want to meet your grandchild." Martha glanced at him, her eyes gleaming with a glimmer of newfound optimism. She nodded, her steps slow but resolute, as she steered Trump and his motorcade toward a path none of them could have foreseen, one that would transform everything. Mrs. Martha moved slowly, her weak form threatening to buckle under the weight of memories and obligations. Her hands held closely onto an old tattered placard. Like though it was the final physical piece of her existence, she could still hang on to behind her. The parade of Cadillac crept along, producing a weird scene in the noisy neighborhood. Trump walked behind her, his gaze riveted on her petite, stooping figure. He could feel the sorrow she carried in every step she made. "Mrs. Martha, what happened to your family?" Trump smashed the side hush, his voice pleasant, yet loaded with a serious undertone. Mrs. Martha hesitated for a time, before turning to gaze at him. Her hazy eyes conveyed a deep sorrow, but also a gleam of resilience. "It was the biggest deluge I've ever seen," she replied, her voice shaking. "The water rose so fast, faster than we could do anything. My kid Jack and my daughter-in-law Laura tried to get Emma to safety, but they didn't make it." Her voice quivered, and her hands grabbed the sign tighter as though attempting to control the flow of emotions, threatening to overpower her. "Jack yelled at me to grab Emma and run," he and Laura stated. They'd find out a method to escape later, but the current, it was too strong. It carried them away. "I couldn't do anything except hug Emma tight and pray. When I found my son, it was too late." Tears streamed down her wrinkled cheeks, but her voice continued calm, yet full of sadness. "We lost everything: our home, our belongings, our memories. Now it's just Emma and me trying to survive each day. But I'm old, and I can't give her the life she deserves." Trump stood silent for a moment. Their narrative wasn't only about personal sorrow, had portrayed a bigger image of many families facing grief and misery. "What have you been doing since then?" Trump asked, his voice low. Mrs. Martha bowed her head, her shoulders sagging even more. "I've done anything I could, from cleaning houses to gathering recyclables, but I'm not as strong as I used to be. No one wants to hire me anymore. In the end, I headed to the streets with this sign, hoping someone would stop to help, but they just passed by as if I don't exist." Trump said nothing, but his look got heavier. He watched her continue on, her steps slower, now weighted down by her story. They turned into a short alley on either side. The walls were weathered and broken, with broken bricks scattering throughout the ground. The motorcade behind them was almost overwhelmed by the suffocating atmosphere and the stink of waste spread about. "We're here," Mrs. Martha murmured softly, pointing to the end of the lane. Before them stood a ramshackle shelter cobbled together from plastic sheets and fragments of wood. The shredded tarps showed a small room inside, hardly wide enough for two persons to lie down. An old wooden bed, a few shattered broken plastic chairs, and a table fashioned from stacked cardboard cartons made up the sum of their possessions. Trump stopped in front of the shelter, his eyes examining the surroundings. A few children, their faces smeared with grime, played with empty tin cans, casting curious looks at him. And the motorcade adults stood at a distance, their eyes a mix of suspicion and uneasiness. From inside the shelter, a little voice shouted out, "Grandma!" A frail little girl, around 10 years old, walked out. Her tangled hair practically concealed her face, and her small hands grasped a homemade doll constructed from a plastic bottle and shreds of cloth. "Emma, come here." Mrs. Martha called. The girl ran to her, wrapping her arms with her grandmother. Her interested glance shifted into Trump. "You don't have to be scared, Emma," Trump replied gently, lowering himself to her eye level. "Your name is Emma, right?" The girl nodded, her eyes still hesitant. "Can you tell me about yourself?" Trump asked, his kind smile soothing her worry. Emma glanced at Mrs. Martha, seeking approval. When her granny nodded, she began to speak, her voice uneasy. "I don't recall much about that night. Simply that the water flowed so rapidly. My mom and dad urged me to run to the neighbors, but they didn't make it after that. I stayed with Grandma. But she's worked so hard. I don't want her to suffer anymore. I just want her." Her voice trembled, and tears began to trickle down her slender cheeks. Trump placed a hand on her shoulder, and his voice forceful, yet comforting. "You've been really brave, Emma. And so has your grandmother. But from now on, you won't have to face this alone. I'm here to help." Emma gazed up at him, her large eyes gleaming with a spark of hope. She nodded, but yet gripped onto Mrs. Martha, as if scared that all of this could just be a passing dream. Trump looked to his motorcade, his statement resolute. I want a detailed report on Mrs. Martha's health and the living circumstances here. Immediately he directed starting tonight. I want a medical team, analyzing both her and Emma, and not just them. I want to know about every family in this area. One of his counselors hesitated, "Sir, perhaps we should depart this to charitable organizations for long-term management." Trump stopped, his voice ringing with confidence. "Nay, they've waited long enough. If a small child like Emma can stand here and fight for her grandmother, we have no excuse to delay action. Starts now." Emma glanced up at him, her tear-filled eyes wide with gratitude. She murmured, her voice tiny but full with love. "Thank you, Mr. Trump. I just want Gran to stop worrying." Trump bent down, meeting her glance directly. "I guarantee you, Emma, this is just the beginning. You've done enough. Now it's my job to aid you." Emma and Mrs. Martha led Trump further into the slums, where sunlight was hidden by patchwork roofs made of old tin sheets and plastic tarps. The tiny route grew tighter, bordered by pass-off trash and stagnant puddles exude. With a damp, moldy odor, each stride Trump took was a bright reminder of the difficulties many people suffer. Daily, folks began to emerge from their dwellings, their gazes a mixture of curiosity and distrust to them. The sight of someone, President Trump, dressed perfectly in a suit, striding amidst the decaying homes was beyond imagination. At first they kept their distance, observing from distant. Mrs. Martha glanced back at him, her words sweet but stern. "Sir, I'm not the only one living like this. Many individuals here lost everything during the storm. We're not just poor, we're forgotten." Her comments opened a floodgate for countless untold stories. A middle-aged man, slender and clothed in a worn-out t-shirt, pondered for a time before walking forward and stating, "Mr. Trump, I can't believe you're actually here." Trump nodded, his voice warm. "Can you tell your tale with me?" The man took a deep breath, as if summoning all his confidence. "My name is Sam. I used to work at a mechanic shop after the flood. The shop was utterly damaged. I lost my job, my house now. It's only me and my 2 kids. I've been trying to get job, but no one wants to hire someone like me. No qualifications, nothing left. We subsist on modest charity dinners and days spent scavenging recyclables. But the most difficult thing is watching my kids grow up without an education." Following Sam's gaze, Trump observed 2 toddlers seated beside a mound of rubbish, rummaging through garbage to entertain themselves. Their little hands were soiled, but their yes shone with purity and yearning. "We don't need much," Sam continued, his voice breaking. "I simply want a chance to work, to provide my kids the life they deserve, like an unstoppable tsunami." More people of the slum began to approach, taking their stories with them. A mother clutching a little infant, her face stained with tears, stated, "My husband perished in the flood. I'm raising 2 kids on my own, working at a garment factory. Yet the wages aren't enough for food, let alone sending them to school. I just want my children to have a better future than I did." A war veteran leaning on a con stepped forward, his voice thick. "I fought for this country, but when I came back, I have nothing left. No home, no job. I survive on food donations, but it's not enough. I gave everything I had, and now I've been left behind." Each story, each voice had its own burden of anguish. Trump stood there, listening closely, his expression contemplative and somber. Emma gazed at him, her eyes brilliant, yet filled with tears. "Everyone here is the same, uncle. They just want to live. But living is so hard." The crowd grew larger. People stood, shoulder to shoulder, their gaze moving from skepticism to hope. Trump climbed onto a huge rock in the center of the alley, so everyone could see him. "I've heard your stories," he began, his voice resolute, "and I want to tell you, you are not forgotten. I'm here, not simply to listen, but to act." Whispers spread through the audience. Trump raised his hand, continuing, I can't alter the past, but I can make sure that from today onward, none of you will have to bear this alone. I assure you we will bring change not just for Mrs. Martha and Emma, but for everyone here. The crowd fell silent for a moment, before applause began to build. At first it was dispersed, but it rapidly swelled into a wave of hope sweeping across individuals who had long felt abandoned. Trump turned to his team, his voice forceful, leaving no room for dispute. I want a medical team here tonight to check on everyone's health. Find a method to give interim refuge for families. Without safe homes, establish a record of every family, their situation and their needs. I want a full report within 24 hours. One advisor hesitated. Sir, this will require time and a thorough plan. Trump cut him off, his voice, forceful and unwavering. They've waited long enough. If a tiny kid like Emma can stand on the street pleading for help for her granny, we have no excuse to delay. Start now. As Trump began to depart, Emma suddenly went up and clutched his hand. Here, yes, gleamed with a mix of faith and worry. Uncle Trump, you'll definitely aid everyone, won't you? You won't leave us behind, right? Trump knelt down, placing a soothing hand on her shoulder. You've done your part, Emma. Now it's my turn. Trust me, this is just the beginning. Emma nodded, a little smile, the first in days growing across her face. The crowd watched as Trump stepped into his Cadillac. One to them, he no longer seemed like a remote leader, but someone who empathized, someone eager to battle for them. As the convoy began to move, Trump glanced out the window, his gaze meditative yet determined. He said softly to the advisor beside him, I made a commitment, and I want to honor it. Get everything ready. This journey has. Just by the next morning, the slum was abnormally silent. But the silence was rapidly broken when massive vehicles delivering medical teams, rescue supplies, and social workers roll in. The sound of vehicles and frantic footsteps rang through the streets, garnering the curious gaze of the people. Emma seized Grandma Martha's hand and dragged her to the front of their modest tent. The little girl couldn't disguise her joy. Grandma, they're here. They truly came. Grandma Martha stood, frozen tears welling in her eyes. For years she had gotten used to hollow promises dissolving into quiet and every flicker of hope crushed by apathy. But now something was different. Yes, Emma, they're actually here, she murmured, her voice trembling from their tent. They could see the medical staff and volunteers unloading goods and putting up improvised medical stations, tables packed with food and water surrounded the tiny pathways. Groups of Rees inhabitants, first hesitant, began stepping out of their residences. Their eyes flashed with wonder. Health care workers moved from house to house. Conducting health checks, they identified multiple cases of malnourished, untreated infections, and severe infected wounds. When it was Emma and Grandma Martha's turn, a young doctor knelt and asked gently, How long have you been experiencing this misery? Grandma Martha replied, a weary smile, I don't remember anymore. I just know I have to keep going for Emma. She's all I had left. Emma squeezed her grandmother's hand tightly, her eyes gleaming with determination. We're not alone anymore, grandmother. They'll help us. It promised. The doctor's eyes glistened with passion at Emma's words. He supplied medication, gave comprehensive directions, and promised to follow upon Grandma Martha's health. In the next days, the arrival of the medical team not only offered relief, but also lit a flame of hope in the hearts of the locals. News of Trump's initiative circulated swiftly beyond the slum charities, and huge organizations began to take notice and join in. The construction corporation, a corporation vowed to restore and reconstruct destroyed homes, guaranteeing every family a safe and solid location to live. The tech company, a large tech corporation, gave free solar energy systems, gave families plenty, without the stress of electricity bills. The education organization, a charity foundation, committed to setting up temporary classrooms in the region, provided students such Emma a chance to learn, while permanent schools were being created in the coming days. Emma became more than just a recipient of aid. She became a symbol of change. She collected the youngsters in Thessalem and started teaching them rudimentary courses using old books. She had learned if we want to alter things, we have to study. Emma told the students here, yes, blazing with determination. The children, originally bashful progressively, gathered around Emma, latching on to her every word. The sight of a tiny small girl in shabby clothes, standing among the youngsters teaching them to read and write, drew many of the volunteers to tears from a distance. An elderly woman watched and softly remarked to a care worker, she's not just a child. She's the light for all of us. Meantime, from his office, Trump closely monitoring the entire process. He requested detailed progress reports every hour and refused to accept any delays. This isn't short-term philanthropy, Trump remarked during a virtual chat with his team. We're constructing a sustainable future for children. I want to ensure that when we go, they can stand on their own, without depending on anyone else. A week later, Trump convened a press conference to showcase what had been accomplished in the slum. The room was full as he got up to the stage, his look serious and full of responsibility. When I visited that spot, I heard some of the most terrible stories conceivable yet. I also saw courage, an elderly woman who refused to give up hope, a tiny girl who stood up for her family. Despite the obstacles, they reminded me of our job to guarantee no one is forgotten. Trump paused slightly before continuing, I cannot change their past, but I can do everything in my power to ensuring their future is brighter. This is not just an act of compassion, it's a devotion. And this commitment will not stop with one slum, it will ripple across this nation. A month later, in the middle of the slum, where a rubbish dump formerly stood, a little park was established at its center. A modest monument was placed to commemorate what had occurred. The monument featured a small child holding her grandmother's hand, signifying hope and endurance at its base. The inscription, read, hope begins in the smallest places. Emma and Grandma Martha stood near the memorial, their faces sparkling. Grand Emma. Martha turned to Emma and whispered gently, do you think a cardboard sign can alter the world? Emma smiled, her eyes sparkling. Not the sign, Grandma. It's the fortitude to hold it up, and the goodwill of people who stopped to listen when Trump saw the news of the makeover of the slum. He grinned, yet his eyes contained a tinge of worry. Turning to his crew, he remarked, there are too many places like that one. We cannot stop now from today. This will be our job to ensure no one is forgotten. Get ready, because this ride is just beginning. 2 months after Trump initiated his activities, the formerly forgotten slum underwent a stunning metamorphosis. The ramshackle temporary structures that previously typified the region were replaced by strong new residences. Streets that had been cluttered with debris and surrounded in darkness were now immaculate, illuminated by solar-powered lights bordering the small lanes. The laughing and talk of youngsters boomed from a central area that used to be a garbage dump here. A temporary school with movable classrooms had been established. Simple wooden desks and chairs nicely placed and tidy became the first location many youngsters had ever encountered. Learning Emma was among the first students. Not only did she actively acquire knowledge, but she also took it upon herself to help other children. Emma became a source of inspiration, a living symbol of transformation. I feel that if we can learn to read and write, we can do so much more. We won't be terrified anymore. And I want my buddies to feel the same. Emma told a volunteer, teaching her how to mentor younger children. The community where Martha and Emma lived wasn't the only one to draw notice. The Hope for the Forgotten movement continued to grow, generating similar projects in various locations across the nation. Contributions from key organizations, construction companies. A large corporation supported the construction of almost 50 new homes for poor families, committing to maintain primary housing quality. For at least 10 years, 2 IT companies put solar energy systems in disadvantaged communities, decreasing electricity bills and providing light to families who had living in darkness. 3 educational organizations put up makeshift schools, offered free teaching materials for children, and organized vocational training seminars for adults, community actions. 1 students in schools conducted contribution drives. 4 discarded textbooks, school materials and clothing which were provided to underprivileged regions. 2 veterans groups created volunteer teams to restore homes and offer career support to families in need. 3 artists and celebrities used their avenues to disseminate the message holding fundraisers and charity events. 3 months after the movement began, Trump staged a huge ceremony at the White House to commemorate individuals and organizations that contributed to the transformation. The Grand Hall of the White House was tastefully but humbly decked, inviting hundreds of key guests, including former slum residents. As Trump stepped up to the platform, his gaze went across the gathering. He began his address with a voice that was both forceful and heartfelt. When I saw Mara and Emma standing on the sidewalk, I didn't just see 2 people. I saw a complete community, ignored by the world. I witnessed grief, but I also saw courage. Change doesn't begin with great gestures. It starts with modest acts, like Emma standing up for her grandmother today. We're not just celebrating them. We're making a collective promise. No one will be left back. Again, after his speech, Trump brought Emma and Martha to the stage. The room fell silence as the grandma and grandchild stepped up, holding hands firmly. Emma, clad in a simple white dress, examined the audience. Her eyes showed with a boldness she had never known. I'm just a child with an old cardboard sign, she began. But because people paused to listen, my grandmother and I aren't alone anymore. Now I know that with courage and faith, we can change the world. Thank you, Mr. Trump, and thank you to everyone who helped us and our community. The hall exploded in applause. Many couldn't hold back their tears, staring at the young girl as a beacon of hope and resilience. Months later, in the area that had once been a rubbish dump in the ghetto, a memorial was unveiled. The statue represented a young girl holding hands with an old woman with new dwellings. In the backdrop near the base of the monument were the words, "Hope begins in the smallest places." Emma and Martha attended the unveiling ceremony. Martha murmured, her voice shaking with emotion, "Did you ever imagine your cardboard sign would lead to this?" Emma grinned, her eyes sparkling with resolve. It wasn't the indication grandmate, was the goodwill of individuals who paused to listen. The story of Emma and Martha didn't end with one slum inspired by the movement. Several other towns across the United States began receiving help in the South. A flood-plagued community was provided funds in helping create a new levee system, ensuring long-term safety in the Midwest. Homeless veteran family received free housing and vocational training programs to obtain stable employment in the West. A community school was created in a remote mountainous location, offering educational chances to hundreds of children. The movement didn't just change the lives of the impoverished. It awakened a sense of social responsibility across society. Watching the news regarding the slums makeover, Trump grinned, though his eyes remained contemplative. A nearby advisor said, "How do you feel with all this?" Trump answered firmly, "I didn't do this to feel good. I did it out of duty. And this duty doesn't end here. There are other places like that. Slum. We can't stop now. This is just the beginning." Turning to his team of advisors, his voice overflowed with determination. "Construct the next plan. This trip has no end. We shall keep going till no one has to live like that anymore." More than 6 months after the Hope for the Forgotten movement in the slum, where Martha and Emma once, life had changed into a model for progress. The rubbish-filled streets were now laid with immaculate bricks. Ramshackle cottages were replaced by strong, tiny residences, created via donations from charities and government initiatives. At the center of the community, where formerly a garbage-littered barren area existed, there now sat a little park with lovely green grass, playgrounds for children, and a well-equipped leisure area. A modest stone monument has been constructed there, showing a youthful girl clutching the hand of an elderly woman a symbol of resilience and hope. Emma stood in the middle of the park, tightly grasping Martha's hand, watching children play around them. "Granny, is this a dream?" Emma asked her, yes, brimming with love. Martha smiled tenderly, her wrinkled hand touching the tiny girl's head. "No, Emma, this is real." And it all started. With your courage, the revolution launched by Trump did not stop at just one small town, but expanded across America, from the flood-plagued South to the isolated West, where students trekked for hours to get school. Relief and development plans were being implemented at unprecedented pace. One housing development, more than 10,000 dwellings were built or restored for low-income people within 6 months. Major construction companies agreed to decrease costs and hasten progress, to ensuring that families were living in temporary shelters received safe housing before winter. The houses were more than simply shelters. They were supplied with solar power systems, clean water access, and shared community areas to enhance social bonding. 2. Education and training programs. Vocational training facilities were built in disadvantaged places, giving free training in mechanics building. And its skills mobile classrooms were distributed in rural places, offering educational opportunity to thousands of students. Such Emma 3. Community healthcare services. Mobile health clinics were sent, visiting impoverished areas, giving free exams, drugs and vaccines programs. People with chronic diseases or requiring surgery were encouraged in traveling to major hospitals for therapy. As the movement progressed, Emma's story became an inspiration for millions nationwide. Emma, once a small girl with a basic cardboard placard, now symbolizing the power of courage and belief. Emma was invited to large events to discuss her narrative at the introduction of an educational support program for underprivileged children. She came onto the stage holding Martha's hand securely. "I once believed I was too small to affect anything. But I've learned that when we dare to stand up and ask for what's right, the world listens. I don't simply want to thank Mr. Trump. I also want to you, everyone who helped my granny and me. You didn't simply transform our lives. You given me an opportunity to dream." The applause thundered through the hall, putting a bright smile to Emma's face, her eyes gleaming with optimism. A national monument of optimism. A year after, Trump stopped his car for Martha and Emma. A national monument was unveiled at the National Mall in Washington, D.C. This monument was built to remember the journey of the Hope for the Forgotten movement and to memorialize those who were once left. Behind the monument depicted a soldier kneeling near a little child, holding a cardboard sign. Behind them were images of new dwellings and a flag waving triumphantly in the wind. Engraved on the base of the statue were the words, "They gave everything. Now it's our obligation to never forget." The dedication ceremony drew hundreds, from volunteers and charities to families who had benefited from the movement. Emma and Martha attended, sitting in the front row, silently gazing at the statue. Trump took the stage, his voice clear and strong. "This monument is not merely a symbol of courage and hope. It's a reminder of our responsibility to keep acting. Every child like Emma, every family like Martha's deserves a better life, and we won't stop until that vision becomes reality." During the event, Emma was invited on stage. With Martha, no longer shy, Emma stared out at the crowd with confidence. "I've learned that one small act can inspire enormous transformations. It wasn't my cardboard sign that altered our lives. It was the goodwill of those who stood to listen. I wish every one of you here continues to do the same for those in need." As Emma's comments reverberated, the audience stood and clapped, their applause unending. Martha clasped Emma's hand tightly, her eyes tearful but filled with joy. Martha uttered, her voice trembling, "You haven't only altered my life, you've changed the us." After Trump's vehicle departed the event, he sat motionless, staring out the window. A nearby advisor broke the silence. "You've accomplished so much. ICE is somewhere else we need to go." "Sir." Trump turned to him, his stare fierce, yet packed with emotion. "Every struggling community, every child that deserves a chance, that's where we need to move. This journey isn't about stopping at a monument or a ceremony. It must continue day by day, action by action, until no one is forgotten. He looked out at the sprawling green fields beyond the window and murmured as if to himself, "Emma made the world listen. Now, it's our turn not to stay. Silence the hope for the forgotten movement after exceeding all expectations in the United States has reached a new milestone." Trump and his team realized that stories like Martha and Emma's are not confined to America, but exist worldwide, from the crowded slums of Asia and impoverished villages in Africa to the neglected small communities of South America. Poverty and helplessness remain burdens on millions. During a global news conference, Trump officially declared the Global Hope Initiative, imagining not just immediate comfort, but long-lasting sustainable transformation for disadvantaged communities worldwide. "We have experienced miracles when the American community joined together to rescue the forgotten. But we cannot stop at our borders. Starting tonight, we shall carry the light of hope to every part of the planet." The Global Hope Initiative is separated into 3 primary phases, each addressing a basic challenge faced by 3 impoverished communities. 1. Poverty. The Global Clean Water Project, collaborating with international NGOs and tech firms to install water filtration systems in areas across Africa, South America, and Southeast Asia, where millions lack access to clean water. Food aid and agricultural reconstruction. Supplying emergency food supplies to communities affected by calamity in conflicts while instructing farmers on sustainable farming techniques. 2. Education and training. Establishing schools in rural locations, creating educational opportunities for children in regions where schooling remain a distant dream. Global grants, granting scholarships to talented kids from disadvantaged communities, offering them the possibility to study at premier universities worldwide. 3. Comprehensive healthcare services, mobile health clinics, deployed clinics to rural places, giving free medical services and vaccines programs to prevent outbreaks. Mother and child health care increase in support for pregnant mothers and newborns in poor communities, where infant mortality rates remain high. The narrative of Emma and Martha has inspired not just America, but the globe world. A short film capturing their adventure and the transformations in their slum was translated into approximately 50 languages, shown on international television networks, and went popular on social media. In a small town in Africa, 12-year-old Amara viewed the video during an outdoor showing provided by a charity. Following word, she turned to her mother and said, "If Emma can do it, so can I. I won't allow our family go hungry." Eventually, Amara's words immediately spread and became a new motto for the campaign throughout Africa. "If Emma can, we can too." Despite its triumphs, the trip was far from easy in several areas. The implementation team faced major issues such as logistical obstacles in a mountainous community. In South America, roads leading to the village were extensively destroyed by flooding, making it impossible to move building materials. Trump was told of the scenario and promptly ordered the use of helicopters to transport the supplies. Resistance from local authorities. In some locations, local officials were afraid that the movement may damage their control. Trump deployed a special diplomatic team to deal with local governments, guaranteeing that the initiative's purpose was to benefit everyone without jeopardizing their legitimate interests. Financial constraints. Numerous big projects delayed owing to delays in financing. Trump conducted a global fundraising event, including together significant donors and businesses, giving over $1 billion to help continue the initiatives. To mark the 1-year anniversary of the Global Hope Movement, a major event titled the Global Hope Festival was staged in New York. Hundreds of people from throughout the world, including those who had been aided, volunteers and representatives from philanthropic groups, gathered to tell their tales. Emma was the distinguished guest of the event. Now a confident adolescent, she came onto the stage with Martha to share her story. "I previously felt I was too small to make any difference, but thanks to everyone's help, I've realized that with enough guts, we can achieve amazing things. I hope my story motivates all of you to rise up and bring hope." to another. A youngster from Africa who had gotten a scholarship from the initiative approached Emma following her speech and said, "Because of you, I dared to dream. Thank you." Emma grasped his hand and smiled warmly. "We can all accomplish it, if we don't give up optimism at the festival." Trump offered a closing speech, highlighting that this voyage was not only a momentary project, but a long-term obligation for all of humanity. Every child like Emma, every community like Martha's teaches us that no one deserves to be forgotten. This path will not finish until everyone in the globe has the opportunity to live a life of dignity. This is not the end. It is the beginning of a bigger, stronger vision. After Trump's motorcade exited the event, he sat silently, his gaze distant. An advisor inquired, "Sir, you've completed so much. Do you believe there will ever be a day when we don't need movements like this?" Trump grinned faintly, his voice reflecting, "That is my ultimate desire. A day when the world no longer needs this movement. But until that day comes, we must continue. This path is not mine alone. It belongs to all of us, and we must not quit." Stop 5 years after the birth of the Hope for the Forgotten movement. Its influence has surpassed all initial expectations across the globe, from impoverished areas in Africa and Southeast Asia to war-damaged nations in the Middle East. The movement has ignited optimism for millions in the United States, the previously slum region where Martha and Emma lives has evolved into a beacon of progress currently known as Hope Village. It stands as an example: community with modern residences, a state-of-the-art school, and a free medical center for all residents. Emma, now a young adult, often teaches at the village school, teaching a new generation of children. The old cardboard sign she once held on the street stands in her classroom as a sobering reminder of the power of courage. "If I could change the world with only a sign," Emma asks her pupils during a class, "what can you do with this well-prepared classroom?" A shy boy raises his hand. "I'll study to become a doctor, so no one would have to be terrified of disease anymore." Emma smiles, nodding, "I think in you, we can all make a difference." The narrative of Emma and the movement launched by Trump has spread worldwide, influencing not just Americans, but citizens in undeveloped nations as well. The Global Hope Initiative was started on a bigger basis, concentrating on 3 major regions. 1. Eliminating poverty. Global Clean Water Project. Over 5,000 water filtration devices have been deployed in villages across Africa and South Asia, supplying clean water to more than 10 million people. A mother in Kenya shared, "My children used to be continuously sick from unclean water. Now we have clean water right here in the village. It feels like a Under Seeds of Hope program." This effort delivers seeds and advanced farming techniques to remote areas, helping them achieve self-sufficiency and escape poverty. 2. Education. School construction. More than 1,000 schools have been developed in rural places where children previously had to walk for hours to reach a classroom. A little girl in Peru stated, "I no longer have to learn beneath a leaky roof. Now I may dream of becoming a teacher." Global Hope Grants. Awards are granted to talented students from poor communities, enabling them to attend top colleges around the world. 3. Healthcare. Mobile health clinics. These clinics bring medical care to rural regions, offering free treatment to millions. An 80-year-old woman in Indonesia shared, "I never imagined I'd see a doctor in my life. They saved me and the children in our community." Maternity and Child Health Program. This initiative increases healthcare for pregnant women and newborns dramatically, reducing mortality rates in impoverished regions in the 5th year of the campaign. A new memorial was unveiled at the United Nations headquarters in New York to remember those who contributed to the cause. The monument shows a young girl holding up a cardboard sign with the words, "Hope never fades." Etched at its basis is a meaningful message: plant seeds of kindness, so no one is left behind. As the movement continued to flourish, Emma and Martha remained in Hope Village. Martha, now frailer, often sat on her veranda watching Emma teach the village children one evening when Emma returned from school. Martha held her hand and quietly remarked, "Emma, you've altered the world. Are you proud of yourself?" Emma smiled gently, her eyes beaming. "I am. But I know there's still so much to do. I want every youngster to have the same possibilities I had." "I won't halt." Grandma Martha squeezed her hand, whispering, "Keep going, Emma. You're the hope of a generation." Despite its great triumphs, the journey of the movement remained. Difficult climate change, floods and droughts triggered by climate change, have destroyed recently developed infrastructure in several regions. Violence and war continues. Wars in countries like the Middle East and Africa have delayed or blocked multiple projects in a meeting at the movement's headquarters. Trump proclaimed, "We can't solve every problem in a day. Yet if we quit up those who need us, we'll never have a chance. As long as one person is left behind, we must keep going." A decade after the movement began, its tremendous accomplishments spoke for today. Then 20 million people had access to safe water. Millions of children attended school for the first time. More than 10,000 disadvantaged areas were totally restored during a 10-year anniversary celebration in Washington. Trump addressed hundreds of attendees. "What we do is not for glory, but for responsibility. This movement isn't about me or any one person. It's about all of us in the we've touched. This journey won't end till no one is left forgotten." He turned to Emma, now renowned social activist, laying a hand on her shoulder. "Your adventure is just beginning. Keep sharing hope, Emma. You've transformed the globe, and you'll achieve even more." Emma glanced at him, her eyes filled with resolve. "I promise I won't stop." The story of Martha, Emma, and the hope for the forgotten movement may have closed, but its message continues to resonate. This is not only a tale of courage. It is a call to action for all of us to aid people in need. This narrative is fake, but its message is genuine. Millions like Emma and Martha are waiting for aid globally. They may not set up a cardboard banner on the streets, yet their grief, loss, and longing for a better life are genuine. Start small, donate to bring difference to those in require, volunteer to directly affect lives. Share to spread this news and ignite kindness in others. If this story impacted your heart, subscribe to our channel to stay motivated. Every subscription and share provides a light of hope for those in need. Let's spread the light of compassion together.